Welcome, everyone. Mike from Hound Dog Media here, and it's time for another episode of Con2Couch. With so many conventions having to delay or cancel this year, we're bringing some of the best parts of that experience right to you in the comfort of your own home. We've got some great guests for you today. We've got New York Times Bestselling author Larry Correia, author, game developer, and professional wargamer Phillip Bolger, and wargamer and developer Ty Beard. Enjoy the show. Welcome, here's our host, Mike from Hound Dog Media here, and it's time for another.
Hey everybody! Today we have gathered some of the greatest minds in nerddom to discuss one of the best hobbies in nerddom, and that is gaming. Guys, go ahead and talk a little bit about who you are and what kind of gaming particularly interests you. Larry?
Sure. I'm Larry Correia. I'm the New York Times bestselling author of the Monster Hunter International series, the Grimnoir Chronicles, Saga, the Forgotten Warrior, a bunch of other stuff. I'm a huge game nerd, primarily role-playing games and tabletop. And my tabletop drug of choice is Infinity from Corvus Belli. I've painted a couple thousand of those, and I'm also a kit basher. I put together a lot of minis out of spare parts. I have I'm looking at a 12-foot long table right in front of me that's just terrain. So I love tabletop gaming, and this is one of my favorite hobbies.
Ty?
Yeah, I'm a lawyer in my day job, but I designed a set of miniature wargame rules of Fistful of TOWs. It's a modern combat. Basically, started out after World War II to the present, but in the last version we carried it from World War I all the way to the present.
And Phil?
I'm a lot like Larry. I'm omnivorous. I like role-playing games. I like board games. I like miniatures. Everything.
We're having a little bit of connection trouble with Ty there. Is he coming through to you guys?
Yeah, I can hear him.
Yep, I got him.
Okay, there we go. And Phil.
Interesting. Let me see if...
Okay, I'm Phil Bolger. I write for Chris Kennedy Publishing, published a novel and a couple of short stories, some of which you guys will be seeing up in the stream. In addition, I am a game developer. I've developed one battle pack for Dan Verson Games, which should be out later this year. I was also one of the developers on the republishing of Lock and Load Publishing's World War 85, which is already out now. In addition, in my day job, I am a defense wargamer, which is a little bit different than wargaming, but it scratches much of the same itches. As far as what I'm into, if it's on a tabletop, I've probably at least tried it. I've tried minis gaming, tried board games, card games, role-playing games. I spend most of my time playing role-playing games, I think, but board games and card games, minis, they've all hit my table at one time or another.
Awesome. So, guys, let me ask, how did you guys get into wargaming? Because I know, like, a lot of us just sort of stumbled into a gaming shop or a comic book shop and saw it, but how did you guys get into it?
Well, okay, I guess I'll go first. Actually, for me, the very first war game I ever played was War Machine, and that's because I had seen Howard Taylor, the guy that does Schlock Mercenary, the cartoon. I'd seen his painted minis, and I was like, wow, I kind of want to try that. And at the time, I had just kit bashed some G.I. Joes to look like characters from my novel. And so I bought some Scorn minis for the War Machine game and painted them. My first paint jobs were terrible. But I played with Howard, and he introduced me. Actually, a neighbor of his was a guy named Alan Barr, came over and helped me out. And me and Alan are really good friends now. We've been friends for years and years. And he's actually the guy that went on to form Gallant Knight Games, who has done one of my role-playing games. It's published through them, the Monster Hunter role-playing game. And so I've played with him for years and years. And so that's actually how I started out, was just I wanted to paint the cool little dudes.
Looks like we had a slight connection problem with Ty there, but I think we've got him back. If you want to try that again, Ty.
Oh, lost Ty.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, yeah, we hear you now.
Hello.
Hello?
Or not.
Usually I'm the one
Ty,
with bad internet.
Oh. All right, he'll be back. I hope so. Phil, what about yourself? How did you get into gaming?
Well, I owe my journey into gaming into one of my friends from high school, a guy named Travis Johnson. No idea if he's watching right now, but if you are, Travis, hope you appreciate the shout out. Basically, I'd come over to his house one day in ninth grade, and I noticed he had all these different little miniatures stacked in his closet. And I'd asked him, like, well, what are these? He goes, that's Warhammer 40,000. And I said the fateful words, what's Warhammer 40,000? And since then, it turns out that it's one of many, many games that can be played on a tabletop. In this case, minis. Also led me into board gaming. And Travis was also the guy that got me really serious into card gaming by the way of Magic the Gathering, which I've quit because if you care at all about your finances, you really should.
Yeah, gaming isn't necessarily the cheapest hobby for nerddom. I mean, role-playing games you can get away fairly easy. One person's got to buy a book. You got to have some dice. Ty, are we back?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey. All right. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yes.
Well, Ty, how did you get into gaming?
I was, 13, 14 years old, and I read Starlog magazine, a classic science fiction magazine of the 70s. And there was an advertisement for a war game called Ogre. Steve Jackson Games' Ogre. And it had a real cool description of it, a giant cybernetic tank, futuristic battlefield, yada, yada, yada. Now, that looks kind of interesting. So the next week I was at the local hobby store buying chemicals for some experiments that my buddies and I were doing in the park. And I stumbled across a rack of these war games. And there was Ogre, so I bought it, and I bought GEV and a couple of magazines. And after that point, I was hooked. That was when AD&D first came. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons came out that same year, and so I got into role playing games and all that too.
So if we had to, sometimes the audience isn't completely up to date on what we're talking about. Could we get everyone's opinion? Like, what is a war game to you guys?
When I think of war game, I tend to think of tabletop war games. Usually, you have some sort of miniatures as a simulation of little dudes, and you fight. And there's usually rules involved. You're trying to reach some goal. You have an opponent, you and somebody else. You have. It could be relatively narrative that there's a story to it, but not necessarily. And it's just kind of like the vibe is kind of like playing chess, but on speed. And I don't know. I don't know if there's an official definition of war game. It's usually some sort of tabletop simulation of a fight. Not super realistic.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They used to call it conflict simulation back in the old days, and it's a model to varying degrees of fidelity of a fight or a conflict that's going on somewhere. It could be historical, be hypothetical, science fiction, whatever.
Yeah, I really like what Ty said. I always think of games as models. They're supposed to be a version of reality that you can transport and easily play with one other person or 5 other people, as it may be. But something that is supposed to replicate reality just in an abstract sense. And for war games, or what differentiates a war game from a non-war game, if you guys ever want to get into real long, drawn-out arguments about this, I can direct you to Consim World, where this issue comes up on more than one occasion. But for my purposes, I think if it is a game, as Ty mentioned, a model that's supposed to replicate reality about war, to me, that makes it a war game. And among some crowds, that would make me a heretic because it doesn't fit certain mental models.
Well, there are a large amount of war games all the way. I've played things where you're the division or even, theater commander, and the models are little squares of paper with some numbers on them representing different units, all the way down to squad level actions where I'm controlling an individual model trying to do its own thing. And that's a huge depth to deal with, and they cover all different facets. Is there any particular level of wargaming that you guys enjoy more?
I like squad based. I like a game where I'm controlling maybe 10 to 20 dudes. There's far bigger war games, but that's just my personal favorite. Is about that range.
Yeah, what I call battalion level, where one player commands roughly a tactical battalion. Fistful of TOWs is designed where one figure represents roughly a platoon, and so you've got a typical player can easily command the equivalent of a battalion. In modern combat, that's the smallest self-contained combat unit, really. So that's why I like that skill.
I think that's kind of a tricky question for me to answer. I think the squad level allows for the most overall depth. It's worth noting that if you play role-playing games with miniatures, you're functionally playing a squad level minis war game. It allows you to really explore how you build your stuff. But if you up it, then you get more of an idea to understand how people that were there. So for historical wargaming, I really prefer like battalions and brigades worth of maneuver, just because that's how you get a sense of why did people act this way or what could have gone different.
So, a couple of different levels there. I've always been a fan of company level wargaming. When I got into it, I was playing 40K at around the 2,000 point level. And, you can have anywhere between 60 to 200 models out there. And I thought that gave a really good scope for like looking at a battlefield and being like, whoa, this is kind of cool. We're kind of doing something there. But I think that's the other thing is wargaming is something that often isn't done in the house. Unless you're very lucky to have a bunch of terrain and tables. Not going to point fingers at this chat.
Yeah, there's some photos of my office are going around out there. My goal in life is I want to beat Joe Manganiello's game room.
That is a worthy goal. Worthy goal.
I'm working on it.
We need to get you and Joe on to do a campaign. That'll be great.
Oh, I would love to play D&D with him. Oh my gosh.
I hate to plug somebody else's thing, but Joe is doing a thing for Make-A-Wish right now where you win a chance to play in his D&D game in Seattle.
Yeah.
I have happily donated to that because I'd love to play with Joe. So we're talking a little bit about like the size of games and things that are happening there. Has there been a game, that just sort of stuck with you the whole time that you've been around? Mine was 40K Inquisitor, which had huge models and tons of different rules, but you really played with about 6 models at any given time. Has there been one game above others that stand out to you guys?
So I came into wargaming relatively late in life, where I could say that for role-playing games, I've got role-playing games like that have stuck with me since I've been a little kid. Mm-hmm. But yeah, on tabletop, I came into tabletop in my 30s.
Yeah, role-playing games. Traveler has always been a personal
such favorite. A classic.
Yep, and the first edition. War games. Not really. I mean, I'm omnivorous. Miniature games, of course. Again, my own set of rules. I've been playing Fistful of TOWs 25 years. I designed it in law school, so I guess you could say it stayed with me.
Do you guys remember Top Secret?
Yes.
Oh gosh, that's one for me. That was the first non-D&D game I ever played. It was a bunch of kids, and we were just kids, and we were so dumb and so bad at it that I remember the games because of how
remember the combat system. It had a glitchy combat system where you roll damage and location, but location wasn't really tied too much with the scale of the damage, and so you could get shot in the foot with a critical impale and die.
Well, my favorite part was during character creation. It was the first game I remember that had advantages and disadvantages, where if you took a disadvantage, it gave you more points to build up your character. And we were a bunch of teenage min-maxers who didn't know any better. And one of the disadvantages was out of Dragon Magazine was an extra one, was lactose intolerance. And so we had 5 spies. There was 5 guys. Every single one of us took lactose intolerance to get like 2 more points. So we had this group of lactose intolerant super spies.
Their only enemy is cheese.
Then we get stationed in Belgium. We're doomed, you know.
Prove you're not a spy. Drink this glass of milk.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, that was That was actually a pretty popular game for the day, as I recall.
Yeah,
So I logged it pretty heavily. In fact, I came across it about 6 months ago and broke it out and was showing it to my daughters. I said, "Ooh, look at this!" And then they're going, "Yeah, that's nice, Dad. Yeah, that's nice."
Years and years and years later, I found out somebody I knew through the publishing world worked on that, and it was kind of awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
Bill Fawcett worked on that.
Okay.
And that was like super cool to find that out years later.
Actually, a better spy game that came out just a few years later was Mercenary Spies and Private Eyes, which was by Flying Buffalo. Sort of a Tunnels and Trolls derivative, but it was a really good game. Problem was Flying Buffalo was thinly capitalized and didn't really support it. But if I were going to play a super agent game, I think I'd go to it even now. You got to gear the weapon damage down. Guns that do 6 dice of damage when you have 10 hit points. Well, I kind of think the designer confused penetration ability with actual damage ability. And so,
one of my favorite role-playing games coming up was D20 Modern. It was what I kind of grew up playing, and it was really cool to me because it was like D&D but with guns.
Yep.
And as a guy 18 to 19 years old, I didn't know that much about guns. I thought I did because I was a guy, so obviously I know what's up. And now, after a decade of working in firearms, I come back and I read this thing's gun rules. I'm like, what was this guy thinking? Like, this is not how any of this works. I don't know why, but the thing that always jumps out to me is it's like when you buy a firearm, you get 50 rounds for free. I'm like, you have never worked in retail. That is not how we do this at all. That's where I'm making my money, is on the bullets. Come on.
Yeah, and the game designs tend to make pistols especially far more lethal than they are in real life. Frank Chadwick many years ago did an article in Challenge magazine where he studied some shooting incidents on the border between a bunch of border agents and Mexican criminals that were coming across the border, and they engaged in a lot of small arms fire back and forth. So it was a pretty good sized population, and it was shocking. On average, I want to say something like the average person shot would take 3 or 4 pistol bullets without dying. Now, shotguns were astonishingly lethal. I think they only had a couple of incidents in that sample, so I don't know if it was representative. But both those guys died. But yeah, hit points like role-playing games don't really model firearm damage apparently very well.
I don't think they model sword damage either. Like,
nah. Probably not.
Don't worry, I only got hit by a longsword 4 times. I'm gonna walk this one off.
Well, that's the old joke, it's
a battle axe, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Phil?
That's the old joke. It's only 1d8 damage. Okay, let me go get the sword from my room. I'll hit you. You'll see how you deal with 1d8 damage.
Yeah.
We are all commoners.
Yeah, we all have 1 hit die.
So
I used to teach I used to teach the Utah concealed weapons class, and that was one of my lines during class when I get to handgun ballistics, was that in real life people don't have hit points; they have blood pressure. And I had to break that down for people.
There was a game called the Morrow Project. Now, this is esoteric in the extreme. Early 80s, like 80, 81. It was a post-apocalyptic game. It was written obviously by some ex-army guys because it actually had blood points. You had you could bleed out. And it's like, like 100 blood points, and so when a gun would hit you, it'd roll for the location, all this, and if it severed an artery or something, you'd start losing blood points, and they could pump saline into you, and it would. It was remarkably elaborate. Actually,
game written by medics.
Well, so that is a good point, though. Just in general, for how do we get down this topic, or why do people play games? I think it's worth mentioning that the whole reason hit points came about was precisely because it was considered too much work to put an actual medical system in. For exactly what Ty said, you have to factor in all this different stuff. It'll be very, very complex. Yeah. I think it's worth noting that the average gamer, even most wargamers, even wargamers that think they're really, really crunchy, I always remind them they're not as crunchy as they think they are. And if you want proof of this, I will tell you this. There is no war game that I've ever played that simulates what happens when Joe forgets his fucking canteen. Sorry for my language. Or forgets his radio, or forgets any number of other essential things. Because if you want to talk about what people spend a lot of time in real combat, it's all right, give us the flashbacks. The what? Oh, you got to be kidding me. We can't drive back there. It's a 30-minute drive.
I'm sure there's a war game somewhere that has like a Joe reliability chart to roll on, and it's like, all right, well, your guys aren't that bright, so 4, you forgot half your combat equipment, drop your rating by 3.
I ran a campaign one time and almost got executed by my friends because of it, because it was a D&D game, and I made them make wisdom rolls to see if they remembered to bring stuff. And they get the done.
Yes.
Well, and see,
Realism.
Wisdom was the dump stat for everybody. Clerics. Anyway, they were like, we're going to throw you out a window if you keep enforcing this rule on us, because I think we had like maybe 2 trips to the dungeon. The healing potion. Well, make a wisdom check. Darn, got the healing potion. That would be a funny rule, though, to enforce.
You're not that bright. You go into dungeons for a living, so yes, I'm willing to bet you forgot stuff.
But what will I do without my 50 feet of hemp rope?
Everybody plays one. Everybody plays one game.
Pole everywhere I go.
Yep.
All time.
And the ubiquitous bag. Everybody else had bags.
I put it in my bag. How much is in that bag? You don't want to know.
But hit points did something else too in role-playing games that I think actually made the games more fun. It became a resource management problem, right? Because one of the early variations of Traveller was a game called Striker, and it was a set of miniature rules, but it had a combat system that you could retrofit to Traveller, and it was pretty good. But you basically rolled 2 dice, you added your penetration, subtracted the armor, and that yielded a light wound, heavy wound, or dead. And the wounds didn't escalate. You could take any number of light wounds; they just degraded your ability. 2 heavy wounds, you were out, and dead is dead. So, but it was very unsatisfying for the players because here's a guy that's essentially unhurt. He gets shot, boom, you're dead. And they didn't. The players didn't like that. I actually adapted it to have damage because it was more satisfactory to the players. But yeah, I wouldn't use a role-playing game, any role-playing game, to assess actual ballistics or anything. And as far, yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I just think it goes to why people play. Most people play games because they want to reenact a movie or reenact history or reenact a sci-fi battle. They're not necessarily looking for a one-to-one model of reality. They accept the abstraction because they want the feel. They want the idea of, I want to make most of the same core decisions, but I don't want to have to manage, fuel rates and maintenance rates. And again, did Joe bring all his gear? Because admittedly, that would be great in sort of like a subverting expectations campaign. I really like the wisdom idea, actually, and might throw that in one of my upcoming things. So get ready, Jack. But I think overall, you have to.
I declaim any responsibility for what they might do to you, though.
Well, we're playing this one virtual, so if we weren't, I wouldn't be brave enough.
Oh, there you go.
So we kind of talk about like what got us into games, the things we remember from games, and all those things. Do you guys? We briefly touched on, but where did you game? Where were the first places that you guys were playing games at? Was it at friends' houses? Were it clubs? I was at a comic book shop, and I would go there for the weekly D&D game, and I would see these tables covered in blown out buildings and rivers and all this stuff. I'm like, why aren't we playing D&D on that? And they're like, oh, no. That's for the 40K club. I'm like, I think I've only played like 3 games. How did you guys play 40,000 of them? I don't know what's going on. They're like, no. And eventually that sucked me in. But where did you guys learn to play?
Oh, for me, I was I was a nerd, but I lived out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I grew up way out in the country. So the first people I ever played with were my cousins, and we were completely clueless. But their dad, my uncle, got us a red box. And I was the GM because I was the most literate of us and the only one that could do math. And it went from there. And then I actually had a friend growing up. and I'd gone over to his house to hang out. His parents owned the local Mexican restaurant, really cool family, and his older brother. You know, I was like, you know, middle school age, playing with my buddy. We're over there playing with GI Joes or whatever, and his older brothers are playing D&D, and I was like, "Ooh, what is this?" And they're like, "Wait a minute, you can read and do math and stuff. Jump on in, nerd!" I was like, "Sweet." And so that's the first time I played with, you know, non-family people, and so I it wasn't really until college that I went away to college that I actually got to play with normal groups of people, like logistically. You know, when you grow up in the sticks, your gaming opportunities are extremely limited.
I started in high school. I was a ninth grade, I think, when I played D&D, and so I had a group of friends, and we would, you know, basically go to each other, go to different houses every week, and Friday and Saturday night, and you know, game all night long, you know, and that kind of thing. And then when I got to college, of course, I wasted, you know, an incredible amount of time playing role-playing games instead of studying. In fact, we played at a place called the Campus Christian Center at little old Tyler Junior College. Playing Dungeons and Dragons. At one time, I had 15 or 16 people in my game. You know, it was crazy. Met my wife there, and she actually talked to me. And, that's a mystery. I never did quite understand how that could have happened. She saw me in there role playing, you know. But
Well, I got my start again with my buddy Travis, but we both grew up Army, and I spent ninth grade in the Republic of Korea at a place called Yongsan Army Garrison. There was one place where you could go to play games with people that you could reliably guess would speak English, which was basically like a corner of the food court they had, the AFIS food court over on Main Post. And every Saturday, they had a guy that had some sweetheart deal with Games Workshop to import a limited number of models and then resell them. So we would go there. We met people there to play 40K, Magic, D&D. I kind of started with pretty basic stuff, but that's where I remember starting to play. Then when I went to college, I got a really solid gaming group. My friend there, Chris Fillero, introduced me to Shadowrun, which really blew my mind as far as what you could do with a role-playing game. And I still talk with most of those guys today. In fact, one of them is on one of my virtual campaigns right now.
So we kind of have seen this transition lately to a more virtual space. Do you guys feel like the virtual world is ready to pick up with pen and paper and rule sets and things like that? Or do you feel like that's always going to be just the place for video games, and there's something about face-to-face gaming that you just can't take away from a virtual space?
That's a tough one. I don't know, because me personally, I like the social. The only time I'm social is gaming. And like recently, I haven't had my regular game group because of all this lockdown crap. And I'm actually really lonely, but I don't get as into online role playing games and tabletop is really difficult because it's the 3D models and the terrain is half the fun. And so if you have one person with all the models and terrain and the other person is remotely and like you're, you know, I want to move here, and you can measure for your friend and move all his stuff. It's not quite the same, but there are some programs like some different tabletop simulator type programs that have popped up in recent years that are really popular. I myself, I haven't really made that jump just because I really like the social aspect.
I think it's better than nothing, but I know I'm mostly I'm a game master. I don't play that much, and when I game master, I tend to stand up and I gesture and I point and I talk, you know, all that kind of stuff. And you know, there's a logistical problem when you go off the camera or something. So
I have acted out. I have acted out minion death as a GM.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm very, you know, and I'll walk over and point, you know, on the table. And so I, you know, maybe if you had a better AI camera set up to where the camera would automatically track the GM and, you know, essentially be like a cameraman, it might be better. But I mean, it is better than nothing, and it does allow you to play with people that, you know, you can't. I've got, you know, I mean, you got friends scattered all over the country, you know, it's better than nothing. But I think the social aspect of gaming is very important to me, at least. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's worth noting. David wrote in the comments that he had the author Donald Featherstone sign a book he authored with Wargaming. Remember, it's a social exercise. I think that's absolutely an essential pickup here. Then I would extend it from not just wargaming, but any kind of tabletop gaming, whether it's board gaming, card gaming, role playing games, miniatures, no matter what it is, it's FaceTime with somebody. So when you take away that face-to-face time and make it more virtual, you lose something. Now, I also agree with Ty, though. It is better than nothing. Just because you've lost the in-person doesn't mean you've lost everything. The other thing I would say, as far as is the world ready for it, is you have to think about how most people come into role-playing games now. When I talk with people that are younger than me, so folks, I'm in my early 30s, a lot of these folks that have come into role-playing game have done so because they've seen it on Stranger Things, or they started watching Critical Role with Matt Mercer, or any number of other sort of new media representations of what this is. As a result, these guys are just craving something because they don't have anything to compare it to. So for people like that, I think virtual gaming is a huge boon. It's not as good in my opinion, but I've also got the nostalgia factor. My baseline is, again, in high school with my friends or in college with my friends.
Yeah, it's a good point. I never thought of that. And even I spend a lot of time just watching YouTube videos about role-playing games and stuff because I have very little time these days to actually run a game. But yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of the younger folks came into it one way or another electronically. I guess that one way of that I would encourage everybody to game is try to set up a local group that meets regularly at a regular place. That was absolutely priceless for me. We had a war game club here, and and the remnants of it still meet at my office every month. But we met at we found there's a museum downtown, and they had a big auditorium upstairs, so we met up there for like 25 years, and it was, at our smallest, there was maybe 5 or 6 of us. At our largest, we probably had 15 people, but we provided
I
that
think you mentioned
continuity.
something about that earlier. We were talking about. I tell the audience about what happened in that club.
Yeah. Okay. So in the early '90s, we had the first invasion of the 40K people. We all of us.
As a 40K person, that is accurate.
That sounds right.
Well, this is second edition 40K. We had most of us older gamers. We had played the original 40K, but we'd kind of But we had this wave of new 40K people coming, and that was fine. Although at one point they got it in their head they kept asking when we were going to vote for the president of the club again. Because they and I looked around and realized they outnumbered us. So I just wrote up a constitution for our club that named one of our members president for life. And
El Presidente.
El Jefe was his actual title, and so we put a stop to that. But anyway, so but my job was I was kind of the club enforcer. I wasn't El Jefe, but I was El Jefe's axeman. I mean, you get these gamers didn't always have the social skills they needed.
The polite term is sergeant at arms.
There you go. There you go. Well, if we had been organized, we probably would have had a title like that. But anyway. So one day I walk in and I got the ringleader of the 40K guy. I said, call all your people together. And I said, look, guys, no more chaos. Don't bring any more chaos models up here. And they're like, well, why? And I said, okay, let's forget the fact that we're in East Texas, in a small town in East Texas. Ground zero of the Bible Belt is targeted on the steeple of my church. Okay, let's forget that. This museum is run by nice, sweet little old ladies in their 70s. And they've been gracious enough to let us meet up here. And we change light bulbs for them occasionally. And it's been a great relationship. I do not want to explain to this little old lady what that thing is. That's a bloodthirster of corn. I said, yeah, okay, great. Yeah, are you getting my point here? To their crap, they didn't like it, but they didn't have any other place to meet. But I just had this horrible vision of this little old lady coming in going, what is that?
The embodiment of rage and death in an unholy universe.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah. More blood for the blood. Oh, boy. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, that was we had to run the chaos out, and it was just because the models were just ridiculously over the top. And then of course the Chaos player wanted to know why the Tyranid player got to play, and I was like, well, you got to draw a line somewhere. Tyranids are cool.
I didn't say it was fair. I said it was the rule.
Yeah.
I used to play in a traveling 40K tournament system where we would basically take our cheesiest armies and go club stomp other clubs at their tournaments. We were okay. Yeah, that's not a great thing to admit about yourself, but we did do it. It was a fun thing to do for a while. But we showed up at one that was in this back alley of an industrial park. And as we walk in, these guys in padded armor and fencing gear are walking out. And we're like, what? And they're like, yeah, the tournament's at a fencing gym. So we got to wait for the fencing tournament to finish up before we can go in there. So we're standing there with like our crates full of army men, like, good strike, riposte. So it was basically like that local club was like any place we can find. Like, yeah. Little fast sword. Yeah, that's cool, but I do think there is something to be said about the physical, like just being there with people and destroying their army, of course, and seeing all their happiness bleed out. Larry, you mentioned modeling, and I've got to say it's my least favorite aspect of this hobby.
See, that's the part I'm best at. I'm terrible at the game. Honestly, every tournament I've ever gone to, I think the highest I've ever gotten in a tournament is third, which is a miracle. But everything else, I've been like middle of the pack. Every single war game tournament I've ever been to in my life, I am right at the bell curve, right? And but the painting contest, I'm always the contender.
Wow.
That's what I'm way better at is the models.
I don't know that I enjoy the painting, but I've got it down to a process. I've got a website, texaswargamer.com, where I put a lot of my stuff out, and it's an industrial process for me. I mean, I even time it and paint 30. I've got tutorials. Paint 25 of these miniatures in 30 minutes, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I like the result, but I don't really particularly enjoy the process. But
so for me, that's my zen. That's what I do to uncork my brain so I can write books all day. So I paint models at night.
I look at your stuff that when you post it, I'm like, man, that's amazing. I'm not going to do that.
I'm amazed at the amount of patience and really, I mean, the amount of real patience it requires to do top-notch modeling work. Well,
and I don't even like. I'm not that as far as patience goes. I mean, I'll put 4 or 5 hours into a model, into a regular 28, 32 millimeter mini, and then I'm done. But like these guys, the golden brush people, the guys that are the 10s.
Oh, those people are insane.
Oh, those people are 40 plus hours on one mini.
Yeah. For the audience that's never seen this stuff before, you'll take a miniature that's, let me get to the camera, that big, and the detail on it is amazing. I've seen a 40K miniature holding a book that had written words in the book, and I'm like, what? Who hurt you? Why did they
Yeah, I'm pretty good, but then there's the guys like that. They're just freakish. And where I come from, we just joke about the Spaniards, because in Spain, mini painting is like a high art form. They get respect.
Really.
Well, that's where Vallejo Paints is based.
They get paid good for it. They drive, they have mini painters driving Lamborghinis.
What?
So this right here are some examples of the stuff that I do, and these are little 1-inch. These models are 1 inch, and that's a process. I can crank those out in about maybe a minute and a half a model.
All right, Jack, do you mind if I swing my camera around here for a second?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah.
All right, so
let's see the good stuff, Larry.
Those are all painted.
Whoa!
Holy crap!
That's my paint station. Those are in process. This is table in process. This is all getting painted right now. And then all those shelves over there are more minis.
I can't wait to visit.
My envy knows no bounds.
So you could loan, you could loan everybody in a gaming club their own army, man. Wow. Whew.
Some people have books, but no, Larry.
That's an
I
amazing.
mean, I got books go in the closet.
all I can see is the scene from Beauty and the Beast when he like opens the library, but it's miniatures.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a problem. In fact, I like to make my own, right? I kit bash, and I took a picture of like my workstation for kit bashing one day, and it's like putting together puzzles, only they're all made out of lead, and it's like thousands of arms and legs and heads just in a big pile.
Larry, you ought to write some tutorials and stuff.
Yeah, talk to us about kit bashing a little bit. Yeah. What goes into a kit bash?
Oh gosh, okay, so kit bash is kind of fun. It's if you're if regular mini painting isn't insane enough for you, you make your own minis out of spare part. So you get a diamond saw and you start chopping stuff up, and you start mixing and matching. How I started with this was I GM a lot of role-playing game campaigns, and one of the things I like to do when I started doing this several years ago was after everybody created their characters and they started getting involved in their characters, I found it really helped to make a mini for each one, like a very specific mini. And sometimes you can just buy the perfect mini and paint it for a character, but other times it's not quite right. And so I started mixing, matching heads and arms and equipment and guns and that kind of thing to get the perfect mini. And then just kind of spiraled out of control from there. And now I sit there with wire and green stuff and
one thing led to another.
Yeah. And so I started doing this a couple of years ago. I'd started building an army I play Infinity, and I started kit bashing more and more people in an army. And now every year when I go to the tournament, I have to play an entirely different army, and they're all kit bashed with some sort of theme. Like I just did an army that was Wakanda. It was all Black Panther characters.
Oh,
cool. That was fun. And then what I'm doing right now is basically it's all the Vietnam War movies. So I have a giant fighting robot that's Animal Mother. Yeah, it's fun. It's taking a fun, goofy hobby and then taking it to another level of stupid, fun, goofy hobby.
So a lot of times with some of the bigger fantasy and science fiction war games, there is a thing called fluff, and that is the background to the world in which you play. Is there a particular fluff that you guys have enjoyed in your time that you've come across?
Well, I wrote 2 novels worth of it for War Machine. Actually, my favorite fluff of any setting in the world, and this is a tabletop and role-playing game because it's for Clan Wars or Legend of the Five Rings and card game. I love the fluff for Legend of the Five Rings. I think Legend of the Five Rings is the coolest fluff of any setting ever. It's a samurai world, magical samurai game, and I love that. I've run multiple multi-year campaigns in this setting, and I'm a dork. I've written a novel worth of fan fiction.
I've read that novel. It's pretty good.
I'm a professional writer, and I wrote a novel worth of fan fiction in this stuff based on a campaign. That's my favorite.
Ty, what about you?
I'd have to say the background to 40K is. I've kind of fallen out of paying attention to it over the last decade or so, but I remember when 40K came out, the version 1.0 in like 1988. Man, we'd never seen anything like this before. I mean, it was just a whole different thing. It's like, what is this? And I do think Games Workshop has done a pretty good job of expanding that setting and all that. They've made decisions that I didn't like, getting rid of the squats and that kind of thing. But as an intriguing background, plus it's basically a Dune ripoff in many respects, and Dune's one of my favorite novels. So there's that.
Phil?
It's a tough choice. I think there's a lot of good stuff out there. It just sort of depends on what you're into. For me, though, I am going to agree with Ty. I think the 40K fluff is worthwhile to the point that even if you come to a falling out with Games Workshop and don't particularly like what they do anymore, the fluff is still worth it, especially if you follow certain authors. I think of Gaunt's Ghost by Dan Abnett, which is a terrific series. I also like it because it's a way of introducing it's military science fiction for a readership that might not otherwise read military science fiction. But I really like the attention to detail he puts in, and I like all the characters. Well, I like all the characters except for the ones I'm not supposed to like. Sure. But just yeah, I think that wraps that up.
I was a big fan of the Gaunt series. More importantly, I liked his Eisenhorn work. Eisenhorn, the Inquisitor series. But as far as fluff goes, my favorite's always going to be Shadowrun. Like, the Shadowrun world is just cool.
Well, if you're into the apostasy of magic and technology being...
Well, if you're into street samurai trolls,
yeah, trash like that, I guess is fine.
Like that sort of
well,
garbage.
I guess that's okay.
Harumph. Get off my lawn.
You kids with your monofilament katanas, get out of here.
Oh, God.
Sorcerers with cybernetic links.
God, disgusting.
Any of you guys ever play, speaking of fluff, any of you guys ever play Deadlands?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great one. That's a super fun setting.
You know,
Really
I
cool
ran
fluff.
a weird, kind of a half-ass Weird West thing with Boot Hill back in the early 80s. The old TSR Western game. Wasn't anything like Deadlands. I mean, that was beyond cool. But I did like the Valley of Guanji, the dinosaurs, and inspired by the classic horror film Billy the Kid Meets Dracula. We swear to God, there is a movie. Billy the Kid pistol whips Dracula. Knocks him out.
Whoa! Spoilers.
Well, no. I mean that was the end of the fight. But yeah, I think that campaign lasted a couple of months. So yeah, when I saw Deadlands, like, wow, this is what I wish I could have run.
That's a great fluff. That's really good fluff.
Yeah.
Can you give us like an elevator pitch on Deadlands for those who might not have heard about it?
Imagine it's a Weird West setting, so it goes back to like the American Civil War, but then there's discovery of bizarre magical forces, and basically it's the four horsemen of the apocalypse vying for control of the who's going to destroy the world in their way. And basically your heroes go around the Old West dealing with monsters and magic, and it's kind of cool. I mean, we played a campaign one time where one of our characters was basically a kung fu Indian. And Pat Tracy's character, Pat's a great guy, great writer, award-winning poet. And I was playing this Mormon gunslinger. Geez, that's a real stretch for me. And but I took this disadvantage where if I rolled a 1, I accidentally damaged somebody in the party. And throughout the campaign, I just continually kept shooting Pat on accident. But no, the setting is fantastic because it's all. I mean, it's like voodoo priests and riverboat gamblers and Indian shaman and every monster you could think of, and werewolves and demons and undead and weird science, but all set in the 1800s. It's a really fun setting.
Are you telling us this is where Bubba Shackelford came from? Is this?
I will say, actually, true story, because I steal a lot of stuff from role-playing games, winds up in books later. Obviously not the whole thing, because that doesn't translate, but bits and pieces. So Bubba Shackelford, yes, actually, originally it's in a Deadlands campaign, and Hannah Stone, the character that has been writing the short stories about Bubba Shackelford, was actually my daughter Hinckley's character. And so the whole thing about how she was a sharpshooter who got fired from Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show for shooting her partner on accident. Because they were doing the shoot the cigarette from his lips trick, and she shot him in the lips.
Oops.
That's all from the game. That was Hannah Stone was her character, and then Skirmish McKillington, the big bare knuckle boxer Irishman, was my son Joe. That's his character from this Deadlands campaign, and they just wound up in the books. So yeah, I steal a lot of stuff from role-playing games.
And there's a Call of Cthulhu Weird West supplement that came out. I haven't read it yet. I have it.
Okay, but talk about Call of Cthulhu is
yes,
awesome.
Beyond awesome. Beyond awesome.
I think it's the game that teaches you that there are some problems that can't be won. It's the Kobayashi Maru of gaming in Call of Cthulhu. Like,
we just did a Cthulhu campaign. Wrapped it up about a year ago. We wrapped up this Cthulhu campaign that Alan Barr ran, and we used the action. It was Trail of Cthulhu. We used the Trail of Cthulhu rules from So it was very miserable. And actually, I lived. That's the only time I've ever played a Call of Cthulhu campaign where my character survived the campaign. That has never happened before. I didn't know what to think. I think two out of 6 of us lived.
Yeah, I've run, I don't know, a dozen campaigns over the years. And the original Call of Cthulhu rules worked very well for Indiana Jones style campaigns. I know they did their Pulp Cthulhu supplement and all that and juiced it up even more, but we never had a problem, blending the two. I always set my campaigns in South Louisiana because that's where I'm from. And so, the party would typically be, like professors at Tulane University and that type thing, and go out into the swamps and have fun. So,
well, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity talking about Call of Cthulhu to plug my favorite supplement, which is Delta Green.
Yeah,
good stuff.
And that's essentially like, what if X-Files fought the Cthulhu mythos? Spoiler, it doesn't go well for Mulder and Scully in this one, but you have a lot of fun watching everything fall apart. Absolutely terrific game system. But like anything else in Call of Cthulhu, I usually tell people that play in campaigns, go ahead and make some backup characters. It'll be not a question of if, but a question of when. But I've also been surprised because if people play smart, you can survive for a pretty long time in these things. You just have to play really smart. It's stuff that in D&D, if you made a mild error, okay, you'd lose some hit points. You may have to pop a healing potion or burn a lay on hands, but you'll be okay. In COC or DG, you're just dead. You stepped up and drew a gun. Everybody shoots you. You have 10 hit points. You take 26 d6 damage. Good luck.
How much got through? Yeah.
The first time I ever played Delta Green, actually, Phil was GM at Dragon Con. You did a one-off game for Dragon Con, and I was in it about 3 or 4 years ago. I want to say that was the first time I ever played Delta Green. That
was a great time. Larry was playing the security policeman, who was just really dedicated to his gains and was very upset that everything going on at this Air Force base was messing with that. It was terrific.
I was a total dude, bro, man. I was drinking my protein shakes. I had a stripper girlfriend. I had a pickup truck that I couldn't afford the payments on.
I feel a little attacked right now.
I was like 19 years old and ripped, and I was like, man, I was a hard charger. Stuff got weirder and weirder. Finally, I was like, you know what? Screw you all. I'm going AWOL. I'm out of here, bitches. And I walked out and got eaten in the fort. I made it halfway across the field and got picked off in the dark.
Yep.
Well, Cthulhu is sort of the ultimate expression of what I call the sandbox mentality. Because when I've run games in the recent past for newbies and younger people, I tell them now you understand, you can go anywhere in my campaign you want to go, but I'm telling you right now, there are things there that will kill you. And if you walk into a room and some big nasty is in there and you obviously are outclassed and you charge him, he'll dust you. And I'll kill you with a smile on my face. So, that's that idea of I never really bought much into the story aspect of role playing games. In that, the idea, well, the players should never be faced with things they can't handle. No, I disagree. You should probably give them an opportunity to escape. Maybe, but boy, Cthulhu is that on steroids.
I have a friend, one of the first people I ever gamed with. I have no idea if he's listening now. I'm going to use his real name. Brady Rowe died so often in our D&D games, we got him a dry erase character sheet.
Oh, that's great.
It would be one thing if he died doing things that you would be like, oh, man, that was just a tough roll of the dice or just something. But Brady would just be like, has the shaman kobold fallen? Yes, we have killed him, but there are many others that we have to deal with. I'm going to loot the shaman.
Oh.
What? Why? 2 rounds later, what do you mean I'm dying? He's raping it off. Like, time to meet Boromir's brother, Faramir.
I think the best record in my campaign was for a regular player was John. I won't give his last name, but John died 7 times in 6 consecutive nights.
Oof.
And he wasn't a particularly stupid player or anything. he just had the worst run of luck. The last one that died, he really got pissed at me. They were cowering in a sewer. It was dark, and a shower of arrows come, and I literally randomized the arrows. And I rolled the dice in front of him, and I swear to God, 4 of the arrows hit him and killed him. He's like,
Okay.
I'm cowering down. I'm going to try to tear the dice.
Goes, we have every year here, my game group does a Halloween game. It's always that we do a Halloween one-off, and Alan always runs it, and it's like a tradition. And these are so popular, he winds up doing like 3 or 4 sessions of the same game for different groups of people around every Halloween. This is a big tradition. He puts a ton of work into it. And I think in the last 7 years I've played with him, I've survived 1 Halloween game. But we had this one where we're playing, the King Pendragon. We're playing, it was the Pendragon.
Another really good game. By the way.
Yeah. So we're playing Pendragon, but it's a Halloween Pendragon game, right? And so it's just this dark, heavy metal kind of King Arthur thing going on, right? And we're in this haunted forest, and he had made a stack of extra character sheets like this thick, right? And what it was is we're going to this final battle, right? And so Steve Diamond's character had died earlier in the night, so Steve gets a backup character. Steve gets one scene, and there was this giant like lake of fire. Your knight had to run and jump his horse across to go into where the battleground was, because we were in hell. And Steve fell in the fire every round for like 6 rounds in a row, to the point where the rest of us were giving Steve our spare character sheet. And Steve was like, I'm going to go to battle. He didn't, my knight falls in the fire. And he flubbed the roll over and over again. For the last hour of this game, Steve died. He couldn't make it through the fire. It was the worst thing ever.
Sometimes the dice just have it in for you,
We were watching him roll, and we were like, you poor bastard.
But would you guys agree, though, that the possibility of dying, the genuine possibility of a character dying, does give the drama that's necessary for role-playing games to be really engaging?
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Hang on, guys. I got to grab a power cord.
In the old, way back in the early days of role-playing, there was a term called Monty Hall dungeons, and that was games where the DM just gave out treasure and everything and all that. And I wonder if today, if people die as much in modern role-playing games as they did certainly in my campaigns.
I think that's kind of a thing I've been seeing more, because I do game with a lot of younger guys and girls, just in environments and places that I run into them. And I have seen some who bring up the idea of, like, they don't like the idea of permanent death for a character, and risk versus this, and this. And it's kind of it's kind of an interesting thing for me, because I love every character that I make for a game. And while I'll easily sacrifice 1,000 Space Marines to win a game for mere bragging rights, my level 4 Paladin, I care a lot about. So, I'll get up there to help you, but I'm going to take my time, and we're going to go slow about this. I think that's an important part of it.
I've always felt that way. I learned how to be a DM by a buddy of mine who is a Vietnam veteran. He arrived in Vietnam just in time for the Tet Offensive. He was a Navy corpsman. He joined the Navy to avoid going to Vietnam, and found out that the Marines used Navy corpsmen in Vietnam. Anyway, but he was the best game master I've ever played with, bar none. But he had an almost Murphy's Law type approach. I mean, if it could go wrong, it would go wrong in his games, and they were always tense, they were always exciting, and they were always fun, and everybody wanted to play. And so that's how I learned, when I that the danger factor, and it has to be real. The players think you're going to bail. If the players think you'll bail them out, they're just not going to take it as seriously. And I think too, a lot of the games where it takes 2 or 3 hours to create characters probably make it a little less, make death a little more of a hassle. There was a beautiful simplicity to classic D&D. Roll 6 times and roll your hit points, and there you go.
Yeah, for me, I think it depends. Honestly, I fudged a lot of things where it should have killed somebody.
Sure.
just as GM, I was like, oh, you barely live, because
Sure.
I wanted to keep him around for story purposes. I'm primarily a storyteller first, and the game system is like my sorry, my power cord is messing me up here. No, so here, I'll stick a soda can next to it. There you go, very high tech.
I'll send my IT team over for you if you want.
Sweet. We're a bunch of professionals here. No,
Yeah.
I fudge death a lot, mostly because is it worth it? But like, I don't know, and it depends also how attached the player is to that character and how much more they're going to get out of that character. And if it's a case where they're really invested in that character and they're having a really good time, my main thing is we're here to have a good time,
Sure.
So for me, it's really cool. I fudge a lot of stuff.
Totally agree. I don't mean to suggest that you should just kill play. In fact, I give the PCs every benefit of the doubt. They need it. It's actually, go ahead.
Sometimes somebody just does something. It's like, oh man, your character has to die now, regardless of what the dice say. Like we just had to, we've had to take a hiatus because of a stupid pandemic. But we're playing an L5R campaign right now, and when I run L5R, it's pretty in demand. We go pretty hardcore. I mean, there's like novels worth of backstory going on. One of our guys did something that was just like so badass, but it's in an honorable samurai setting where basically he did this super badass thing, but it's like he's doomed. He knew he was doomed when he did it. It was like so poetically, he's doomed. And so the session ended, and I was like, yeah, you might as well get your next characters ready. You know how this is going to go. And he's like, yeah, I'm toast. He knows next session, he's dead man walking, right? But it was one of those. It was such a beautiful moment where it was such a pure samurai moment. It's like I got to do this. I got to do this awesome thing, and so he's doomed now. But we all know that going in because of the setting. So I guess the thing for me is like, what's the settings?
Yeah.
Delta Green, you're screwed. You're gonna die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think setting is a lot, and I think the other thing I always do for any campaign I run for a role-playing game, I'll do what's known as a session 0 first, and session 0 sets expectations for kind of how it's going to be. That's always what I tell people in Delta Green session 0. Don't expect to make it through this campaign. You might. I've had people do it before, but usually they do that bleeding sanity and having to have murdered several of their friends along the way, so it's not really a pleasant process even for those who do survive. By contrast, a lot of players that I play D&D with, they're really looking for something heroic. And in those cases, I use what I call death as a dramatic device. In other words, no, I'm not going to kill you because you step on a spring trap and it does fatal damage to you. I'll fudge that and I'll let you live. Why? Because what does it mean if you die in the dungeon's entrance? No. But if you die to the Lich, who you guys keep fighting after it's apparent that you can't beat him.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're gone, man. It's time for a new character.
That's exactly right. I'd never say never. I don't think I'd ever kill a player character out of something that he had no control over, like falling down a spike trap or something, And typically, one of those stunts I always use as a game master was I'd say, well, roll to grab the edge. Of course, he'd blow the roll. Okay, roll to grab the side of the thing on your way. You keep letting them roll until finally they make a roll, and so, well, you're wounded, but you're not dead.
I was told that the screen hides a multitude of sins.
Yes.
Sometimes I'm like, I'll make the roll for you, and it's because, bro, you've got to pass this thing, otherwise it's a bad day.
Well, one of the greatest moments of joy for me as a game master was a couple of years back. They were playing a Traveler game, and they came across a big, nasty experimental fusion gun, right? I mean, this is a big honking dust, And when the most experienced player in the group, Greg, goes, "Oh God!" And everybody's like, "What do you mean? If he's giving us that means we're going to go up against something really, really, really nasty." I was like, "It's the nicest thing anybody's ever said."
Chekhov's BFG 9000.
That's right. Yeah, just exactly. But I think that the risk though that you could die, I don't see how you can play. I've never had a fun game where I didn't think I could die. And I've played it. We've all played in campaigns with GMs that couldn't, that for whatever reason just wouldn't kill you, and it gets boring quick.
We did an Action Cthulhu game a few years ago. That's World War II Cthulhu, right? World War II Call of Cthulhu, and we were playing the 101st
with the Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah, so we were basically playing a bunch of soldiers, but we were playing the 101st Airborne, and the first minute of the campaign was dropping into on D-Day to secure the bridges, and so my character was like the grizzled NCO character, was the Sarge, and I had taken the paratrooper edge, so I got to re-roll parachute rolls. So we start out. This is the first couple minutes of the campaign, and my buddy Steve, this is the first campaign he ever GM'd. We start out, I roll a 1 on my parachute roll, and so my parachute doesn't open. I'm falling to my death. And I was like, oh crap, this is going to be the fastest I've ever gone through a character. And so then I was like, oh, wait a minute, I got the parachutist edge because I'm a paratrooper NCO. I get to re-roll. What? At that point, this is Steve's first ever campaign, and I'm about to splat 1 minute into the game. And Steve's like, spin a Benny. I'll give you one more reroll. I was like, okay. So I did, and then got it that time. Otherwise, like the only way you could die faster is in Traveler when you die during character creation. You know?
Yeah, that's a real. Now that's a man's game.
6 hours later, and he's dead. This has been a great game.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you could come out with a character who's 60 years old, that's got more skills than anybody, or a guy that musters out in one term with gun 1. That's his only skill.
I know one thing, and I don't know it very well.
Yeah.
You need a whole session just to make your character, make your crew for the first game, though.
Yeah, I always pre-generate characters if I can. I'll ask the players ahead of time, hey, what kind of character do you want to run? By the way, y'all need a cleric or y'all need a doctor, whatever. And because I like to, when I do have time to run a game, I don't want to be rolling up characters in the first session. That sucks the life out of me, at least.
Yeah, we usually do like a dinner, like me and the guy, like we'll get together for dinner or whatever, like the week before, and make up character. Like honestly, last time we started doing this L5R campaign, we went to a sushi restaurant, all you can eat sushi, and just sat there making up magical samurai. But
see, now being a nerd is cool. Well, I don't know how cool it is, but at least it's everywhere. And
I'm a really good tipper at the sushi place, and they know me, so I'm a regular, so they don't care.
Oh, I knew we had arrived. Gosh, in the early 2000s, I read a National Review article, and the columnist referred to his illusionist character that he ran when he was in college, and he did not explain it. He just assumed that the reader would understand the reference, and I went, yes. I went to my wife and I said, yeah, you beautiful people, your time is at an end, and we have arrived. She's like, what? I said, yeah, it's about the time that the Lord of the Rings movies came out. And I was like, yeah, Lord of the Rings movies, you got, D&D being referenced in National Review. Yes, we're triumphant.
True
I think
story.
Game of Thrones also.
I used to own a gun store and machine gun dealer, and we were right next to Utah National Guard headquarters. It was drill weekend, and we had a special forces battalion there. So it was a bunch of tough guys coming in at the lunch hour. There's like a SIA ACU, just all these Green Berets hanging out in the gun store. And one of the other owners was a Green Beret from that unit. And so we're there, and about 20 guys at lunch, and somebody asked to see a gun off the wall, and it was one of my personal ones. And I took it off the wall, and I go, this is my +5 Vorpal Holy Avenger, right? And I handed it across. Out of the 20 guys in the gun store, and we're talking a bunch of badass snake-eating trigger puller types, 19 out of 20 got the joke. And they're like, we had one guy who didn't understand the D&D reference. And he was like,
he was probably captain of the football team or something.
No, it was Mike Coopery. Who's the nerdiest guy ever? He was an EOD guy. He was the nerdiest guy ever. He just never played role-playing games. I'm like, how did you not know this?
I was at a place. The less details, the better. And I was talking to a young lady at this place, and she spotted my Harry Potter tattoo. And she was like, "Oh, that's awesome. I love Harry Potter. That's what got me into D&D." And I'm like, this is a different world than what I grew up in.
Either that, or she's a Russian agent trying to get secrets out of me or something.
I'm going to be honest. She could have whatever she needed from me.
Yeah. Well, I'd kept my nerdishness completely under wraps for the first 24 years of my legal career. And then Nick Rekieta shows up one day with a case. And as I explained, I said, I call him Gandalf. I said, my life was just fine until you showed up with 13 dwarves needing a burglar. And so then I picked up some clients that are a game company, a role-playing game publisher. And so I'm out. Just didn't really want to be explaining to my business owner clients, as I'm sitting at a table, rolling dice, miniatures.
Yeah,
now it's all better.
I was writing fantasy novels on the side. So like, hey Larry, what do you do for fun? It's like, I write fantasy novels. It's like, yeah, I was pretty much out of the closet.
Yeah.
I had nowhere to hide.
I managed to hide it through most of my mid-20s. My friend Rory will tell a story often about one of my girlfriends coming over and cleaning up my house and finding a stack of D&D books and her being like, what are these? And I'm like, they belong to Rory. I don't know why I lied, but it was just the automatic lie.
I learned it from you, Dad.
He's like, no, they don't. Those are his.
I learned it from you.
Yeah. And if they know Rory, that's funnier too.
Oh yeah. Rory is the atypical nerd, long-haired elf-looking dude who sells leather costuming for a living. So
I am definitely going to refer to him as long-haired elf-looking dude from now on.
Yeah, that's just the best way to refer to him.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we've talked about what I love about these conversations are the memories. And it is a lifelong hobby when you get into, I'm just going to say gaming, because anytime we tabletop, could it be a board game? Could it be a role-playing game? Could it be a war game? Could it be a card game? Gaming is one of these lifelong hobbies that I think just gives you an amazing set of friends and stories to tell. And I don't think they translate really well to people who have never played the games. Like if you've never role played, you're not going to get half the stories. But if you've done it at least once, then all these stories are for you.
Yeah, I've never heard golfers talk about individual games of golf. The way that
remember that time I hit that ball really well? That was a good day.
I putted it and it was 27 feet away, and dadgummit, it went right. I just, gaming as a hobby, though, it gives you a lot of stories, a lot of memories. A lot about it is fun to recall. I don't know of any other hobby really that does that, or none that I've ever experienced. So,
yeah, I think it's unique narrative building. I think that any game you play has not just one story, but there's hundreds of little vignettes, several different paths, and everybody takes something different away from that.
Yeah, and it's something everybody knows how to, at least the role-playing stuff, everybody knows how to role-play. If you ever played Cowboys and Indians or whatever it is the kids play now, that's the analog, you know how to role-play. I think computer games probably helped us out too, because there were a lot of people that played computer RPGs that had never played tabletop.
Well, you can take someone who's played Skyrim and then say, this is D&D. They understand what they're looking at now, and they can see it in their mind's eye.
Yeah, I remember when my mother-in-law, for whatever reason, she when Doom, the original Doom came out, she became an addict. This little 60-year-old lady playing Doom. But anyway, so she and my two brother-in-laws, none of those people had ever heard of role-playing and anything. They became fanatics at these games and other games that were related like that. And I said, okay, that's what we do when we play Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, oh, okay. All of a sudden they got it, because hey, sit around the table. How do you win? Well, there's no winning.
I disagree. There's absolutely a win feature in D&D.
You guys have my father-in-law and mother-in-law, and my wife is a jock. Oh, she sends her love, Jack, by the way. No, my wife's a marathon runner and a jock, and her dad played college football. Was captain, Johnny Football Hero, beat up Merlin Olsen back in the old days, and could have went to the NFL kind of level athlete, and so just did not understand the geeky crap that his son-in-law was into. until actually Big Bang Theory. They had the D&D episode of which to us nerds, it's just painful. But he watched the D&D episode of Big Bang Theory, and he's like, oh, okay, I kind of understand what it is you do now. That was like his...
You're going, maybe not the optimum frame of reference, but...
Okay.
Well, I think for a lot of folks...
I was like, I'll take it.
For a lot of folks, it's a matter of commonality. One of the things I've suffered with, so my partner, Vicky, does like role-playing games, but she doesn't like fantasy. So my attempts to get her into D&D a bunch just always fell flat because at the end of the day, she can't care about, orcs and trolls. That's not her jam. But when we started playing modern stuff, whether that was Delta Green or more, spy-focused stuff, she's suddenly attentive because that's all the TV shows she watches. So I think for a lot of ways, it's about meeting somebody in something they're going to understand. If they don't like fantasy or sci-fi, they might like modern. If they don't like modern, they might like fantasy or sci-fi.
Yeah. There's if there's a genre, there's a game for it, and of course you can adapt an existing game pretty easily anyway. So it's not,
Well, can I plug something I'm working on real fast then?
You can plug all day long.
Okay,
plug away.
It's kind of postponed right now because of the world is in flux, but I have a role-playing system that I've come up with called Gritty Cop Show.
Yes.
And it's basically because I love gritty cop shows. That's like what I write fantasy and sci-fi all day. When I watch TV, I want it to be something entirely different. So I watch a lot of Justified, Luther, Bosch, the Longmire. This shows I watch. And so one day I threw together a one-off gritty cop show game for my role-playing group, and it actually worked out pretty good. It's very rules light, very rules simple, because it's very narrative driven. It's almost like a little more organized version of like Fiasco level storytelling. If you've ever played that,
Fiasco's great.
But it's just every trope from the cop shows. Like every character trait is like a line from a cop show you're going to recognize.
I'd like to write the Life on Mars supplement for that game.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm working on that right now. I'm going to plan on Kickstarting it. I've got a pretty good rule system banged out. And it's kind of funny because, like I said, I got a guy who's a professional role-playing designer. He's like Phil, and Ty. And he's in my game group, Alan. And Alan's like, yeah, it always amuses me when people think they can just do what I do. And then let me see it. And I gave it to him, and he read it. He's like, shit, this is actually good.
Well, yeah, you've been doing it for about 30 years. No, Life on Mars was a British TV show and then an American series about a modern-day cop that got teleported back to 1974.
Yeah.
And so, that would be a cool role-playing game to play. Yeah, because imagine how different the universe was in 1974. No computers, no cell phones. There's a scene in one of them where he tells him to run the fingerprints, and say, "We'll have the results back in 6 weeks." And the guy goes, 6 weeks? He goes, "Yeah, isn't it amazing what they can do now with technology?" But that would be a 1970s supplement would be pretty cool for something like that, my opinion.
So let's pull back just a little bit because we're probably getting close to the end here. If you had to recommend somebody their first tabletop game, what would you recommend?
Okay, I actually, when I get that question, I point people towards Savage Worlds. It's just the rules simple. The rules are really quick and easy to learn, and it's just very fast. It's a very fast-paced game.
I'll subvert the question. Doesn't really
Excellent.
matter. Yeah,
the lawyer subverted my question. I'm shocked. I tell you.
Find a really good game master who knows how to run a game and run it smoothly. It doesn't matter what the system is. Find somebody that knows how to GM and just sit down and play. But if you had to do a system, any of the old school Renaissance retro clones, all those are pretty good. I mean, they'll at least give you some idea of what the current D&D players are talking about.
I think it would matter. I would agree with Ty that a game master is important. I would say the next level is make sure you have a good group and make sure whatever you play, you're all interested in. One of the things that turns a lot of people off for role playing is that the first experience they have is something that they like okay, but everybody else is really into, and they just kind of get dragged along for the ride. You want to make sure that whatever you guys play, it's something everybody's going to be able to be enthusiastic about, because what kills role-playing game groups is it's really when the schedule falls apart, but the biggest thing that kills the schedule is lack of enthusiasm. The nature of people engaging in a luxury hobby, something that's strictly for fun, is that they're not going to tell you, I'm not having a good time. They're just going to stop showing up. So if you don't work that out when you start, it really won't matter what you play.
Well, to your point about the way you gave your players a briefing at the beginning of what to expect, I would think, join a group that does that so that you know what to expect. I think that ties into what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing with that is keep in mind that everybody approaches role-playing games from a different angle. And I'll use D&D since that's the market leader. But if you sit down at a table with 5 people that are playing D&D, and everybody that you's playing from the first time, they might know it from The Big Bang Theory, from Community, from Stranger Things, from Critical Role, from any number of sources that are all varied and different in how they approach that game. If you've come to it somebody that only understands D&D is Monty Python-esque and it's comedy, they're going to be very out of place in somebody that wants to play something that's much more akin to Lord of the Rings in tone. And that's just within one genre. That's to say nothing of the genres. That said, I will agree with Larry. I think Savage Worlds is terrific in terms of it's a streamlined system. And the other thing is that there's modules for everything. If you can name the genre, either there's a published Savage Worlds adventure, or there's somebody that's done on the open gaming license, or there's somebody that's just thrown it up on Reddit and said, hey, have you ever wanted to play in the Salvadoran Civil War? Use these roles. And, it's don't quote me on that. That may not actually be out yet. But
well, that money it probably is.
There's good odds. But yeah, Savage Worlds is great for an intro system, and it has enough versatility that your veterans and your long runners aren't going to dislike it. It's fun for just about everybody.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we always ask people to plug what they're currently working on or what they've currently made. So, Larry, you already plugged Gritty Cop Show, which we're all looking forward to. Anything else you want to plug?
My next book that's out is Destroyer of Worlds. Will be out in September. It's the 3rd book in the Saga: The Forgotten Warrior, which is my epic fantasy series. So that is up next.
Looking forward to it. Ty, what do we got from you?
I don't have a life, so I'm going to plug my daughter's book she just released, sequel to her first novel, Radio Nowhere, Radio Static, post-apocalyptic, no zombies. So,
as it turns out, the real apocalypse doesn't have them either. I'm super bummed too.
First apocalypse, right? People are going to obesity is going to kill more of us off than the apocalypse.
Who knew DoorDash would outlast the cops? And Phil, what do you have, my friend?
So right now I've got a couple development projects under wraps. What I can talk about is I have a battle pack for Dan Verson Games' Warfighter WWII, which was successfully kickstarted about 4 months ago. It's currently on the way over. I did the Tarawa battle pack, and I did Tarawa from the point of view of the Japanese. I'm sure this will get me hate mail. I'm not a Japanese nationalist, I promise. But I just found it very fascinating that they were willing to fight so ferociously for what amounted to a few miles of sand. Otherwise, writing-wise, I've got 1 novel and 3 short stories out. My novel is The Devil's Gunman. It's urban fantasy set in Minneapolis. It's pretty gritty. I would rate it a hard R. There's sex and violence and a lot of cursing, so not for kids, but if you like that kind of thing, come on over. And then I've got short stories out. I've got 2 short stories in a universe I call the Oahu Pact, which is America and Japan have ended up as allies in World War II. Again, I swear I'm not a Japanese nationalist. The nationalists get purged in this timeline. I don't like them. The rape of Nanking was bad. But yeah, it's a good time. You can find that out from Chris Kennedy Publishing.
Well, the World War I Japanese, we could have been allies with them. We were, as a matter of fact.
Oh yeah, if you want to talk,
something happened to them though.
If you want to talk more about this, I would absolutely love to. The descent of Japan into madness from 1918 to 1933 is one of my favorite things I've ever learned about.
Well, has anyone ever? I'm just curious. Do you have a recommendation for anybody that's actually explained it? Because as a history guy myself, that's been the most inexplicable thing. How the Japanese can go from being almost a model Western style power to what they became by World War II. It's
So I actually haven't seen anybody that's explained it. I've had to learn about this basically through reading about sources that just documented what happened, but they can't really say why. There's a few competing theories. One of it is because they were shut out on the international stage prestige-wise. You know, they feel like they didn't get credit for what they did against the Russians in the early 1900s or what they did against the Germans during World War I. And there's some credence to that,
So
but
somehow
it's still,
that leads to Nanking.
but that's just it. Is where does that lead
Yeah.
into absolute
Yeah.
ultra violence that isn't seen in the earlier wars with Japan? It's not really explained.
Well, we'll
But-
definitely be
No.
bringing you back for the alternative history panel at some point.
Yeah, don't let me derail this
That
here.
would
This is a passion project.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is
gentlemen-
ironic since that's the alternate history period that I did.
All right, so we're going to bring this whole crew
Nerds!
back
Such
next week
nerds!
for alternative history.
Man, I'm there.
Guys, I really do want to thank you for coming out. We absolutely loved having you on here. I think that it was great talking to you guys about a passion we all share.
Nice to meet you guys, by the way.
Well,
Yeah,
I
nice
hope
to
we
meet
can
you
have
too.
all three of you back for other shows and other panels because our goal is to continue to do awesome panels that people can view from their couch. It's the whole play of the name.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd
certainly
like to
it's the
thank
time
everyone
for
for tuning in today. And if you like what you saw here, just give us a like on the stream and subscribe to the channel. If you've got any ideas for what you'd like to see in a future show, leave us a comment and we'll take a look. And I'll go ahead and turn it back over to these guys here to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for coming out, and we will see you guys next time.
See you guys.
Cheers. Take care.
Y'all take it easy.